My sister has been dead for a year, so when my phone rang last night and her name flashed on the screen, my world just stopped. Sarah and I, we were inseparable, grew up like two halves of the same soul. Her laugh was the kind that could just fill a room, and her advice? That was my compass for everything. When the accident happened, a part of me died right there with her. The silence she left behind was deafening. It was a quiet I never got used to, but I learned to live with it. The emptiness became a part of my everyday life. I thought I had accepted it, that I had found a way to move on. Last night was just like any other. The house was quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock in the hall. It's a sound I've come to hate, a constant reminder of time moving forward without her. I was about to head to bed when my phone buzzed on the counter, just a dull vibration against the granite. I glanced at it, not really paying attention, expecting a late-night spam call or a wrong number, but it wasn't. The name on the screen was Sarah. Her picture, that smiling selfie we took at the beach, lit up the dark kitchen. My heart hammered against my ribs. It felt like it was going to break right through. This had to be a glitch, a cruel, sick joke from someone who'd gotten her old phone number. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady as I pressed the green button. I didn't say anything. I just listened. I held my breath, waiting for a stranger's voice, a prankster's laugh. At first it was just static, a roar of white noise like an old radio stuck between stations. I was about to hang up, my eyes stinging with tears of frustration and grief all over again, when I heard it. A whisper buried deep beneath the noise, almost lost in the crackle. It said, "Hello? Can you hear me?" It was her. It was her voice. Faint, broken, like it was coming from a million miles away. But it was Sarah. I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the static-filled whisper still leaking from the tiny speaker. I couldn't breathe. My mind was screaming at me. This isn't real. You're grieving. You're exhausted. You're losing your mind. But what if it was real? A desperate hope, a terrifying, beautiful possibility took root in my heart. I knelt down, my hands still shaking uncontrollably, and picked the phone up. I pressed it to my ear so hard it hurt. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice hoarse and ragged. "Sarah, is that you?" The static crackled, and then her voice came again, just a little clearer this time. "I'm so cold. It's so dark here." Every night since, she calls. Always at the same time, just as the clock strikes midnight. The connection is always terrible, a storm of static, and her words are always fragmented, broken pieces of sentences. She sounds lost, and so scared. She talks about being alone in the dark. She keeps asking why I haven't come to find her. "Where are you?" she'll whisper. "Why did you leave me here?" I've started to hear things even when the phone isn't ringing. A faint whisper on the wind when I open a window. The scent of her jasmine perfume in an empty room. I haven't slept in days. I just sit in the dark watching the clock, waiting for the phone to ring. Waiting to hear her voice again, no matter how much it terrifies me. But last night's call was different. It started the same. The buzz, the name, the static. But then it all stopped. The background noise just vanished. There was complete and total silence for a moment. Then her voice came through, and it was crystal clear. There was no static. There was only pure, raw terror. "He's here. He told me you'd answer. Don't listen to him. Don't—" The line went dead. The call just ended. The silence that followed was heavier and more frightening than any static. And then I heard a floorboard creak upstairs. I'm sitting here now, in the dark. The phone is on the table in front of me. I realize now she wasn't calling to tell me she was alone. She was calling to tell me that I'm not. It started as a stupid joke. My friends told me they couldn't see my reflection in the mirror. I laughed it off, until I looked for myself and saw nothing but the empty wall behind me. My bedroom mirror has been on that wall since I was a child. It's seen me grow up. It's seen every bad haircut, every tear, every quiet smile. It's always been me. But last Tuesday, that changed. My friends, Sarah and Ben, were over. We were just messing around, laughing, getting ready to go out. Sarah was putting on mascara, using my mirror. She suddenly stopped and squinted. "That's weird," she mumbled. Ben leaned in beside her. He just stared. I asked them what was wrong. Ben looked back at me, then at the mirror, then back at me again. His face was pale. He said, "Dude, where are you? I can see the room perfectly, but you're not in the reflection." I laughed. A prank, obviously. I walked over, ready for the punchline, and stood right behind them. And that's when my blood ran cold. They were right. In the mirror, I could see Sarah, her eyes wide with fear. I could see Ben, his hand covering his mouth. I could see my bedroom wall, my posters, my lamp, everything. Everything except me. It was like I was a ghost, a vampire, just a blank space where a person should be. They left in a hurry. They didn't know what to say. I don't blame them. I spent the next hour just staring, waving my hands in front of the glass. Nothing. I tried my phone's camera, set to selfie mode, just the ceiling behind me. I ran to the bathroom, the medicine cabinet mirror, same empty space. How can you exist if you can't see yourself? The days that followed were a nightmare. I stopped going out. I covered every reflective surface in my apartment with sheets and towels. The windows at night, I had to board them up. Every car window, every puddle on the street felt like a void waiting to show me my own nothingness. I started to feel thin, faded, like I was slowly being erased from the world. I'd touch my own face just to make sure something was still there. My skin felt cold, foreign. The feeling wasn't just physical, it was this deep, existential dread that gnawed at me constantly. If no reflection proves I'm here, am I really? I'd pinch my arm, hard, just to feel the sting of reality. But the relief was fleeting, always replaced by the chilling silence from the covered mirrors. The isolation was crushing. How do you explain this to someone? "Hey, I've become invisible to mirrors." They'd think I was crazy. So I stopped answering calls, ignored texts. The world outside my boarded-up windows kept moving, but I was trapped in a silent, reflective prison of my own making. The silence in the apartment became deafening, broken only by my own ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of my heart. I started talking to myself, just to hear a voice, to prove I still had one. But even that felt distant, like it was coming from someone else. Last night was the worst. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to see something, anything. I ripped the sheet off my bedroom mirror. I stood there in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I begged. I begged the mirror to just show me something. "Please," I whispered, "just let me see myself." And for the first time in a week, something happened. A shape started to form in the glass. It wasn't clear at first, just a dark smudge in the space where I stood. It slowly took shape, a tall, thin silhouette. But the shape, it wasn't mine. The proportions were all wrong. The arms were too long. The head was tilted at an unnatural angle. It was there, in my spot, staring out of the mirror. And as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could finally see its face. It wasn't me. It was something else. And it was smiling. Then, it raised a hand, its long, spindly fingers pressed against the glass from the inside. And a voice, not my own, echoed in my head, cold and clear. It said, "Thank you for the trade." I looked down at my own hands. They seem longer now. And when I smile, it doesn't feel like my own. They said my mirror isn't showing me. They were wrong. It is. It's just not me anymore. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content that explores the shadows. Let me know in the comments what you would do if your reflection disappeared. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.
Have you ever heard a sound in your own home that you just can't explain? For me, it started with a knock from somewhere it shouldn't be. It began 3 weeks ago. Living alone, You get used to the groans and creaks of an old house. You learn to ignore them. But this was different. It was late, maybe 2 a.m. I was in bed just starting to drift off when I heard it. A faint tap, 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 coming from the living room wall. My first thought? The neighbors. But my neighbor is a sweet old woman who's practically deaf. Then I thought, maybe it's the pipes. Yes, that must be it. Just the house settling. I rolled over and forced myself to sleep. But the next night it came again. Same time, same wall. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it felt more deliberate. It wasn't random. There was a rhythm to it. A pattern. My heart started pounding in my chest. I sat up in bed, straining my ears, just waiting. The silence that followed was somehow louder than the sound itself. I didn't sleep at all that night. The third night I was ready. I sat on the couch in the dark, my phone recording, my eyes glued to that empty stretch of wall. The clock ticked over to 2 a.m. And right on cue, knock, knock, knock. It was so much louder. It wasn't a tap anymore. It was a firm, solid knock. Every muscle in my body went tight. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen solid. I finally managed to whisper into the darkness, "Who's there?" Silence. And then, from inside the wall, a new sound began. A scratching. It sounded like fingernails dragging, searching. The sound moved slowly, from one end of the wall to the other. Something was alive in my walls. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bathroom with the door locked, listening to that awful scratching until the sun came up. This has become my life. During the day, there's nothing. I've checked for rats, for structural damage, for anything. The wall is solid, cold, and silent. But every night, when the clock strikes 2, my torment begins. The knocking gets more aggressive, more demanding. It's not just in the living room anymore. It follows me. If I'm in the bedroom, it knocks on the bedroom wall. If I'm in the kitchen, it's there. Knock, 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 knock. It's like it knows where I am. It's hunting me inside my own home. Last night was the worst. The knocking was so violent I thought the wall was going to break. In a moment of pure terror, I screamed at it, "What do you want?" And for the first time, something happened. The knocking stopped. The house fell completely silent. And then from the other side of the wall, a voice whispered back. It was faint, hoarse, and it sounded exactly like me. It said, "Let me out."
A quiet night of babysitting turns into a terrifying mystery when the parents mention the other sitter, the one who was never supposed to be there. Sarah was just a college student trying to make some extra cash. The Hendersons' house seemed perfect, a beautiful, quiet home in a cozy suburb. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson were kind, and their 2 children, 7-year-old Leo and baby Maya, were angels. As they were heading out the door, Mrs. Henderson paused. "Oh, and Sarah," she said, "don't worry if Emily helps out. She knows the routine better than anyone. She's wonderful with Maya." Sarah just nodded, a little confused. She hadn't been told about another babysitter. Emily? Maybe a relative who lived nearby. She shrugged it off. More help just meant an easier night. An hour went by. Leo was playing with his toys and Maya was fast asleep in her crib. The house was still. Too still. A chill crept up Sarah's spine, the kind you get when you feel like you're being watched. She peeked into Leo's room. He was talking to himself. "No," Leo whispered to his action figure. "We have to be quiet. Emily is rocking the baby." Sarah's blood ran cold. She slowly walked to Maya's room and peered inside. The rocking chair next to the crib was empty, but it was moving. A slow, steady, rhythmic rock, back and forth. Creak, creak, creak. But no one was in it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This had to be a joke, a prank. She backed away from the door, her eyes wide with terror. She tried to tell herself it was just a draft, an old house settling. But she knew. She wasn't alone. Later, while she was in the kitchen, A glass of water suddenly slid off the counter and shattered on the floor. But before it hit the ground, it seemed to slow down, as if an unseen hand tried to catch it. Sarah stared at the mess, her breath caught in her throat. Then she heard it. A soft, gentle humming coming from the baby monitor. A lullaby she didn't recognize. That was it. She grabbed her phone to call the Hendersons, her fingers fumbling with the screen. As the phone rang, she saw something that made her scream. At the top of the stairs, for just a split second, stood the silhouette of a young woman, her form hazy and transparent. She looked down at Sarah, not with anger, but with a look of deep, profound sadness before vanishing completely. Mrs. Henderson picked up the phone. "Sarah, is everything okay? You sound terrified." Your other babysitter," Sarah stammered, tears streaming down her face. "Emily, she's here." There was a long, heavy pause on the line. The silence felt like an eternity. When Mrs. Henderson finally spoke, her voice was choked with grief. "Sarah, that's not possible," she whispered. "Emily was our babysitter last year. She died in a car accident on her way home from our house. She loved our children more than anything." Sarah understood then. Emily wasn't there to haunt them. She was there to protect them. The rocking chair, the whispered conversations, the attempt to catch the falling glass. She was still on the job, a faithful guardian who was never taken off the schedule. Sarah spent the rest of the night huddled on the couch, not in fear, but in a strange, sorrowful awe, feeling the protective presence of the babysitter who was never supposed to be there. If this story gave you chills, please like the video and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Thank you for listening.
Have you ever caught your reflection in the corner of your eye and sworn it moved? A flicker, a twitch, something you dismiss as a trick of the light or your mind playing games. I used to dismiss it too. I used to laugh it off. Now, I know the truth. That thing staring back at me from the glass? It's not me. It all started on a Tuesday. I know, a boring day for a nightmare to begin. I was exhausted after a long day at work, just going through the motions of my nightly routine. Brushing my teeth, staring blankly into the bathroom mirror, my mind a million miles away. I leaned forward to spit into the sink. As I did, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. My reflection. It was still standing straight, still staring right back at me with my own empty eyes. My heart skipped a beat. I snapped my head up. There he was, my reflection, perfectly mimicking me again, as if nothing had happened. I shook my head, blaming it on being tired. "You're just seeing things," I told myself, my voice echoing in the quiet bathroom. But a cold, heavy feeling had already settled in the pit of my stomach. It was a feeling I couldn't shake. The next night I was cautious. I watched myself in the mirror, testing it, trying to prove I was just going crazy. I raised my right hand. He raised his left. "Okay, normal." I nodded. He nodded back. I forced a smile, a tight, nervous grimace. He smiled back, but his smile was wider, sharper. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes, my eyes, were cold, like chips of glass. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room run down my spine. I quickly fumbled for the light switch, plunged the room into darkness, and hurried to bed, pulling the covers over my head like a child. But you can't avoid your own reflection. It's everywhere. The darkened screen of my phone as I scroll through pointless updates. The window on the bus, showing me layered over the passing city. My own ghostly image walking alongside me in a shop window. And every time I saw him, he was a little different, a little off. He'd blink a fraction of a second too late. His head would be tilted at an angle I wasn't holding. It was like watching a delayed video feed of my own life, but the actor was getting his lines wrong on purpose, and only I was in on the sick joke. The fear started to consume me. It was a constant, buzzing anxiety that followed me everywhere. I stopped sleeping. How could I, when I knew he was waiting for me in the dark in any polished surface? I covered the mirror in my bathroom with a towel. I started keeping my phone face down. I stopped looking out of windows at night. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home, haunted by myself. Last night was the worst. It was the night everything changed. I couldn't sleep. The silence of the house was deafening. I crept into the kitchen to get a glass of water, my footsteps muffled on the cold floor. I glanced at the dark window over the sink, at the blackness of the backyard outside, and I saw him. My reflection. He was standing there, in the dark kitchen behind me. But I was the only one in the house. I spun around, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Nothing. The kitchen was empty and silent. I turned back to the window, my hands shaking so hard I could barely stand. He was still there, staring at me from the window. And then, he did something that shattered my world into a million pieces. He slowly raised his hand, not to mimic me, but to wave, a small, friendly, terrifying wave. And then, he smiled, not my smile. A horrible, wide grin full of teeth that were too long, too sharp. They weren't mine. He put one finger to his lips, as if telling me to keep his secret. I'm recording this now because I don't know what else to do. I shattered the kitchen window, but it doesn't matter. The shards on the floor just gave him more places to watch me from. I just looked into the reflection on my laptop's camera. He's there. He's looking at me right now as I speak. And the worst part? He's not smiling anymore. He looks angry. He looks like he wants to get out. If you enjoyed this story, or if it made you think twice about looking in the mirror, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the dark. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a strange experience with your own reflection. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and whatever you do, don't look too closely.
Have you ever felt so lost that even moving forward felt like you were going backwards? Some roads aren't meant to take you anywhere. They're meant to keep you. What's up, everyone? And welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a story that will make you think twice about taking that shortcut on your next road trip. This is the tale of Leo and the road that never ends. Our story begins with Leo, just an ordinary guy on a long drive home. He's tired, the highway is monotonous, and he spots a little country road on his map. A shortcut. According to the GPS, it would shave a whole hour off his journey. Why not, right? The sun was setting, casting this beautiful, almost magical glow across the landscape. The sky was a canvas of deep oranges and purples. For a while, it was perfect. Just Leo, the hum of his car's engine, and this peaceful, winding road stretching out before him. He felt a sense of calm, the kind you only get when you're alone with your thoughts, surrounded by nature. An hour crawled by, then another. And this is where things start to get strange. Leo glanced out the window and then at the clock on his dashboard. The sky, it hadn't changed. It was stuck in that same perpetual state of twilight. It wasn't getting darker, but the sun wasn't rising either. It was just frozen. He frowned, tapping the fuel gauge, still showing half a tank. That didn't make sense. He should have been home by now, or at the very least, close to running on fumes. He passed an old gnarled oak tree. Its branches were twisted, reaching out like skeletal fingers against the dusky sky. It looked familiar. A little chill, a tiny seed of unease began to plant itself in his mind. He tried to brush it off. "It's just a tree," he mumbled to himself. "Lots of trees look the same out here." He just needed to focus on the road, but then he saw it again. An old, dilapidated farmhouse with a single broken window on the second floor, staring out like a vacant, hollow eye. He'd passed this exact farmhouse 20 minutes ago. He was sure of it. He remembered the specific way the porch roof sagged. His heart started to pound in his chest, a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. A nervous sweat began to bead on his forehead. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. Okay, calm down," he whispered. But his voice trembled, betraying his forced composure. He was starting to feel the first real pangs of panic. Instinctively, he reached for his phone, his lifeline to the outside world. He pulled it from his pocket, his thumb swiping frantically across the screen. No signal. Of course. Why would there be a signal out here, in the middle of nowhere on a road that seemed to exist outside of time? Desperate for any human connection, any voice to break the oppressive silence, he turned on the car radio. He spun the dial, searching for a station, a song, a commercial, anything. But all that came through the speakers was a crackling, whispering static. And if he listened closely, really closely, he could almost hear faint, distorted whispers hidden within the noise, like a conversation happening just beyond a closed door. That was it. Panic took over. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, the engine roaring in protest. The serene countryside became a terrifying, blurry vortex of green and brown. The road ahead transformed into a hypnotic, endless gray ribbon, pulling him deeper into its trap. He just had to get off this road. He just had to find a turn, an exit, a simple dirt path, anything that would lead him away from this nightmare loop. His eyes darted from side to side, searching for a break in the trees. And that's when he saw the oak tree again, the same twisted skeletal branches reaching for the twilight sky. But this time, something was different. A shape was standing beneath it. A dark, tall figure, perfectly still. It wasn't moving. It was just watching him. Leo didn't dare to look back. He didn't turn his head. He didn't check his mirrors. He couldn't. His knuckles were bone white as he gripped the steering wheel, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He drove and drove, his eyes locked on the asphalt in front of him, praying for it to end, praying for a sign of civilization. And then, it happened. A sign did emerge from the gloom up ahead. A familiar green sign with white lettering. As he got closer, his eyes widened in sheer horror, his mind struggling, refusing to accept what he was seeing. It was the sign for the turnoff. The turnoff he had taken hours ago. The very sign that had led him onto this cursed, impossible road. He had driven in a perfect endless circle. He was right back where he started. He slammed on the brakes. The tires screamed against the pavement as the car skidded to a violent halt, right in the middle of the road. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then died. And then, silence. A complete, deafening silence that was louder than any noise. The twilight was gone, replaced by an inky, starless black. He was trapped, a prisoner of the pavement, held captive by a road that wouldn't let him go. His body trembled uncontrollably. He slowly, hesitantly, lifted his eyes to the rearview mirror. And he saw it. A pair of headlights appearing in the distance behind him. Another car, another driver, just like him, tired of the highway looking for a shortcut, turning onto the road that never ends. The road that was patiently waiting for its next victim. What a chilling thought, right? To be stuck in a loop, repeating the same stretch of road forever. It makes you wonder what other hidden places exist just off the main path. Thank you so much for watching and joining me for this spooky story. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there, and maybe stick to the main roads. I'll see you in the next video.
They say the worst thing about an old house is the silence. I wish this one was silent. The real horror here began when the whispers started, coming from right beneath my feet. I moved in 3 weeks ago. It was supposed to be a fresh start. A charming old house on the edge of town, full of character. And as it turned out, full of strange noises. At first, I just dismissed them. I mean, every old house groans and settles, right? The sighing of the wind, the rattling of the pipes. I kept telling myself it was all perfectly normal. But then came the first voice. I was in the kitchen, just making coffee. It was so faint, I almost thought I'd imagined it. A soft murmur like a television left on in another room. But I was the only one here. I checked every single room. Nothing. The house was still. The silence that followed was somehow heavier, more aware. A few nights later, it happened again. I was lying in bed just starting to drift off to sleep. This time, it was clearer. It sounded like a woman's voice, pleading. I couldn't make out the words, just the feeling. The raw desperation in her tone sent a chill crawling up my spine. It was coming from the living room floor, directly below my bed. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I lay there, completely frozen, for what felt like hours, just listening. But there was only silence again. A heavy, waiting silence. The whispers became my unwanted companions. They were never loud, never entirely clear, just a constant, unsettling presence in the background of my life. I started hearing them in broad daylight. A man's gruff muttering from under the hallway rug. A child's faint whimper from beneath the dining room table. I was living on a knife's edge. I stopped sleeping. I started talking to myself, just to fill the quiet with a voice that I recognized, a voice that was my own. My friends told me I looked terrible, that I was just stressed from the move, but they didn't understand. They couldn't hear it. They couldn't feel the house watching me, listening to me. I knew I wasn't alone. The voices, they felt trapped, and I was trapped here with them. Last night was different. I was sitting on the sofa, just staring at the floorboards, when the pleading started again. But this time, I heard a word. One single, clear word that cut through all the muffled sounds. Help. That was it. That one word changed everything. I couldn't live like this anymore. The fear had been simmering for weeks, but now, it boiled over into something else. A desperate, consuming need to know what was happening. I went to the garage and grabbed a crowbar. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. If there was something under my floor, I was going to find it. I started in the living room, right where the sound was always the strongest. The old wood groaned in protest as I forced the tip of the crowbar into a seam between the boards. It fought me. With a loud, splintering crack, the first board gave way. A wave of musty, cold air washed over me, smelling of damp earth and decay. I peered into the darkness below, but I saw nothing, just dirt and shadows. My heart sank. Was this all in my head? But the whispers were louder now, closer, urging me on. So I tore up another board and then another. My breath hitched in my throat. There, half buried in the dirt, was a small, dark shape. It wasn't a pipe. It wasn't a rock. It was an old, leather-bound book, a diary. My fingers trembled as I lifted it from its earthen grave. It was damp, but miraculously intact. I opened it to the very last entry, the handwriting frantic, almost illegible. It read, "He knows I'm writing this, he's coming for me, but I will not be silent. If you are reading this, do not trust the house, do not listen to the walls, and whatever you do, never, ever let us out." And then, a new voice spoke. It wasn't a whisper from below. It was a calm, clear voice that seemed to come from every corner of the room at once. "You shouldn't have done that."
The hum of a late-night bus is a lonely sound, but the silence that comes after is far worse, especially when you realize the driver has vanished. Leo was tired, the kind of tired that sinks into your bones after a long week. The midnight bus, number 44, was his usual ride home. Its rhythmic swaying and the soft patter of rain against the glass were almost a lullaby. One by one, the few other passengers had gotten off, melting back into the wet, dark streets. Soon it was just Leo and the stoic bus driver, whose eyes he'd only ever see in the rearview mirror. He pulled out an earbud and the silence felt heavy. He glanced up. The driver's seat was empty. His heart did a little jump. That wasn't right. The bus was still moving, gliding smoothly through the empty city. Maybe the driver went to the back. No, that's impossible. Leo stood up, his hand gripping the cold metal pole. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding small and weak. No answer. Just the steady hum of the engine. That's when he saw him. There was another passenger, tucked away in the darkest corner at the very back. Leo hadn't even noticed him get on. The man was old, dressed in a damp, dark coat, and his head was bowed low, as if he were sleeping. A sense of relief washed over Leo, but it didn't last long. The old man slowly lifted his head. His face was pale, almost like wax, and his eyes were wide open, fixed directly on Leo. But they weren't angry or curious. They were blank, empty, like two dark tunnels. Leo felt a cold sweat prickle his skin. He quickly sat back down, pretending to look out the window. But his gaze kept flicking to the reflection in the glass. The man hadn't moved. He was just staring. The bus passed under a streetlight, and for a split second, the interior was flooded with orange light. In the reflection, Leo saw the old man. But he wasn't just staring. He was smiling. A wide, unnatural smile that stretched his papery skin too far. And his reflection in the glass wasn't smiling back. It was crying. Panic began to claw its way up Leo's throat. This wasn't his route. The familiar shops and houses had been replaced by dark, looming warehouses and endless empty roads. The bus was going faster now, barreling into the darkness. He scrambled for his phone. No signal. Of course, he had to get off. He slammed his hand on the stop button. Once, twice, nothing. The button didn't light up. The bell didn't ring. He risked another look at the back. The man was now standing. He wasn't walking towards Leo. He was just there. Standing in the aisle, closer than before, that same horrible wide smile on his face. He hadn't made a sound. "What do you want?" Leo choked out, his voice barely audible. The old man's smile widened even further, and a sound finally came from his throat. It wasn't a voice. It was a dry, rattling sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. He raised a single long finger and pointed, not at Leo, but at the empty seat right beside him. "You see, the number 44 bus always has to have a passenger. It can't ever run empty, and when the last passenger reaches their final destination, the bus simply finds a new one to take their place. Forever." Have you ever had that feeling? That prickly sensation on the back of your neck? That you were being watched? Now imagine that feeling in a place where there are no eyes to watch you with. Only empty waiting sockets. It was a wrong turn, a detour down a long forgotten highway that led me to the town of Oakhaven. At first it looked peaceful, almost idyllic. Quaint houses, white picket fences, streets canopied by ancient oak trees. But something felt profoundly off. The air was too still, the silence deafening. People were out, tending their gardens, walking down the street. They all smiled as I drove past, but their heads were tilted at a peculiar angle, as if they were listening to me rather than seeing me. It wasn't until I stepped out of my car that the idyllic picture shattered. A woman approached me, offering a basket of freshly picked apples. She had a warm smile, but where her eyes should have been, there was only smooth, seamless skin. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. I looked around wildly, and the horrifying truth dawned on me. Every single person. The old man rocking on his porch, the children playing hopscotch in the street, the baker standing in his doorway, dusted with flour. None of them had eyes. Not a single one. My mind screamed, "Run," but my feet were cemented to the pavement. How could this be real? Was it some bizarre sickness, a collective nightmare I had stumbled into? The woman just kept smiling, her head cocked, listening to the frantic drumbeat of my heart. "Welcome to Oakhaven, stranger," she said. Her voice was as sweet as honey, but it made my blood run cold. They didn't need to see. They could hear everything, every shaky breath, every nervous shuffle of my feet, every terrified gulp of air. I tried to play it cool, to act unfazed. I nodded, mumbled a lame excuse about needing to get back on the road, and scrambled back into my car. But as I turned the key, nothing. The engine sputtered once, then died. Dead silence. And that's when I heard it. A slow, rhythmic tapping sound echoing through the town. Tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of their canes on the pavement. Slowly, in unison, they were all turning towards my car. Their smiling, eyeless faces were all pointed directly at me. They knew I was scared. They knew I wanted to leave, and they weren't going to let me. I later learned the town legend. It spoke of a creature that had gifted them with a different kind of sight, a sight that came at a terrible price. They gave up their eyes to truly see the world, to see fear, to see souls. And on that day, they wanted to see mine. Adrenaline finally kicked in. I abandoned the car and just ran. I sprinted down the silent streets, past the dark houses with their empty windows. The tapping sound was everywhere, an omnipresent echo closing in from all directions. I could hear their soft, calm footsteps just behind me, never rushing, always confident. They knew. They knew there was no real escape from Oakhaven. I burst through the woods at the edge of town, branches whipping and scratching at my face, my lungs burning for air. The tapping slowly faded behind me, and I thought I was safe. I ran for what felt like miles until I finally collapsed onto the cold asphalt of the main highway, saved. It wasn't until the next morning, when I found a small, grimy motel and stumbled into the bathroom, that I dared to look at my reflection in the mirror. I wanted to see the man who survived the town where no one has eyes. But the man looking back at me, he couldn't see anything at all. Thank you for watching. If this story sent a chill down your spine, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there.